What is up, guys? Come on in. We got another fun video for you on the Fantasy Fellowship channel. My name's Kyle. In this video, we're going to go over the secret stats for wide receivers and tight ends that you need to know for your upcoming fantasy football drafts. And I'm going to hop into a screen share. I'm going to show you guys the article that I put together this morning. I did get a really nice comment down here, and this was in regards to my running back touch points data study. If you haven't watched it yet, I'll probably link it maybe in the description or something below. But check it out. I've got some really good stats here for you guys that you should know about when you're selecting your running backs and helping identify some guys and some numbers here that we're looking for. The comment here was from Faraz Mahmood 2552. Oh my God, this was absolutely brilliant. Can we get something like this for wide receiver as well? So this is what I have put together in response to his comment. And on the fantasyfellowship.com, if you just go to the 2023 playbook, if you scroll down, that's where you're going to find a lot of my articles and my stat nuggets. And I'm calling it again, the secret stats for wide receiver and tight end. And what I have for you guys is I've used my projections, and then I looked at 2022 data. And what we're looking at, the three secret stats are target share, yard share, and opportunity share. Now, target share is pretty simple. You know, if a team throws the ball 500 times and Cooper Kupp has 100 of those targets, he's got a 20% target share. So you want guys that get targets. For opportunity share, that's how many times the player had opportunity to touch the ball. So rushing attempts plus targets. And then you divide that number by the total team plays that were ran. So that's going to, help guys like Deebo Samuel and some other players like Curtis Samuel who get the ball running the, rushing attempts. And then yard share is the total amount of yards a player gets rushing and receiving. And then you divide that by the total number of yards in his offense, which basically just says, yes, this player is highly involved in this offense and he helps move the ball. So you took all those three stats together, and I created a little percentile here that shows us what we're looking at. So the first thing we're going to look at is my compiled target share, yard share, and numbers from last season. And I'm just going to show you guys how sticky these stats were. So the top 7 receivers last year in PPR were Tyreek Hill, JJ, Devontae, CD, Diggs, AJ Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. They were all top 7 receivers in full PPR. And guess what? They all were top 7 when I combine target share, opportunity share, and yard share, and I get a final number here on the far right. These guys were my top 7 receivers in these metrics here. So this number does stick quite well if you're looking at all 3 of these guys here, and I'll continue to show more information. Where it got a little bit interesting was wide receivers 8 through 11. We're talking Garrett Wilson, who was wide receiver 21, DJ Moore, who was wide receiver 25, Deontay Johnson, wide receiver 30, and Drake London, wide receiver 31. These guys were the outliers in this data study, and that's because they had insanely high target shares, like they were the clear best target in their offense, but they didn't really have the production. They didn't really get a lot of yards. They didn't really get a lot of touches in that offense. So I guess they did get a lot of yards. They got a lot of touches, but the yards really, I guess, they were on teams that didn't really get a lot of yards. So they were the best player on their team typically. They just were not on the best offenses. So the Jets, the Panthers, the Steelers, and the Falcons all struggled throwing the ball last year. So this metric does make the top elite receivers pop, and then also shines a light on the guys that are pretty dang good receivers. They're just in bad offenses, and they're probably like these guys, Wilson to Drake London here. They're all wide receiver 3s in fantasy football, and they will be outliers in this data study. But as we got back after these guys, I got Amari Cooper, who was wide receiver 10. He ranked 12th in my metric. Wide receiver 9 was Devonta Smith. You got wide receiver 14, DK Metcalf. Wide receiver 20, Michael Pittman Jr. So it is true that when I combine all 3 of these secret stats, I get a metric here that shows me pretty accurate results for fantasy football. These guys are all top wide receivers here. In fact, I have to go down all the way here to Cortland Sutton, who was 30th in my metric here for the 3 secret stats, and he was wide receiver 43. So he's the only receiver in the top 30 of my metrics to not finish as a top 36 wide receiver, basically a wide receiver 3 for fantasy football. If I go down further a little bit even more, that's Donovan Peoples-Jones. So essentially, the higher you are on this list, the better wide receiver fantasy season you're going to have. And then I continue on this list. I show the top 50 in this metric here of my percentages. And basically all these dudes were basically top 50 wide receivers. So this is a really sticky stat. And then I kind of did some write-up here for you guys. But then let's look at the target shares, because targets mean everything for fantasy football, especially with wide receivers. I have the top guys here The weird one was Drake London, who again, he popped in target share just because he was really the only receiver healthy at the end of the year. He was soaking up targets left and right. So he sticks out like a sore thumb here. But again, when you have a guy that's on a not very good team and he's going to guaranteed lead the team in target shares, that to me means he's a wide receiver 3. So again, that's Drake London this year. That's probably even DJ Moore this year. There might be a couple other guys that qualify, but still, the part remains the same. If you're getting a boatload of targets on your team, you're going to be good for fantasy football. And again, the same names popped up from before: DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson. These guys were both solid wide receiver 3s last year, and they were the clear leading target on their team. And then we get back to normal here. So, your wide receiver 9, 7, 14, like these all kind of, toe the line again. And I have to go all the way down. Like Robert Woods had an insane high target share, but he was on a really bad Titans team. Cortland Sutton, there's some outliers in this study, but overall it's not too bad. But for the most part, the top 23 receivers in target share all finished as wide receiver 2s or better. Besides Drake London, who was wide receiver 31. So again, the higher the target share, the higher they're going to be for fantasy football here. And then you get some like insane efficiency guys here, like Godwin was efficient with his targets. T. Higgins was very efficient. Mike Evans was efficient. And some of these, metrics depend on touchdown, but for the most part, you want targets from your wide receiver. Let's keep it moving here to opportunity share, which again is the rushing attempts plus targets divided by total plays ran by the team. And at the top of the list here is Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb. So the top 5 receivers all finished in the top 6. Again, we have our outliers here in Garrett Wilson, Deontay Johnson, Michael Pittman Jr., also an outlier here. Again, these are great players, great wide receivers. They're just on bad teams. So if you're drafting Michael Pittman Jr. because you think he's not going to be a good player this year, well, he's going to get opportunity. And the opportunity should rank him as like a wide receiver 2/3. So if you can get, these guys, later in your drafts, I think you're going to be in for a good ADP value there on them. So again, opportunity share, how many times is this player getting opportunities to touch the ball? The more opportunities they get within their offense, the better they're going to be for fantasy football. And I have to go all the way down here to the first one again is Cortland Sutton, who just had a bad year last year for the Broncos. But even then, he was 29th in opportunity share, wide receiver 43. He was a wide receiver 3-4, kind of a flex guy for you. But again, most of these guys on this list finished as top 50 receivers. So it just goes to show you the more opportunities you get, the better you're going to be. But I think my favorite metric from the secret stats here for wide receivers is going to be yard share. You're going to shake out a couple of those guys there that were outliers in the beginning. Our top 7 receivers here all finished in the top 8 last year. Justin Jefferson, 28.29% yard share. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Diggs, AJB, Jalen Waddle. These guys were all top 7 in yard shares last year. And guess what? They were all top 8 wide receivers. Terry McLaurin, he was 8th in yard share. He was wide receiver 15. Garrett Wilson, he was wide receiver 9 in yard share, but he was wide receiver 21. So the yard share kind of shakes out some of those outliers, and it really shows you that yards are the most important stat for fantasy football. They're going to raise all of your floors here. If you get a 1,000 yard receiver, that's going to be a good fantasy season. And it keeps going here. Let me see when I can go find the outlier for yard share wide receivers. We're going to see it down here. George Pickens was the first wide receiver on the list in yard share at 14.39%. He was wide receiver 28 in yard share, and he finished wide receiver 39. So he was the first outlier in the yard share department. But it keeps going again. Cortland Sutton, we know he had a bad year. But for the most part, if you were a top 30 player in yard share metrics, you were probably a top 30 in fantasy football here. So again, yard share, opportunity share, target share, you want to be aware of what these numbers can be for your fantasy wide receivers. Now, we're going to come back to wide receivers here because I got some stats I want to show you guys, but I want to read this nugget for you. We had 22 wide receivers go over 1,000 total yards last year, and all of them finished as top 24 wide receivers. So there's a threshold for you. If you have a receiver who's projected for 1,000 plus yards, and that can be 950 yards receiving and 50 yards rushing, right? If he's going over 1,000 all-purpose yards, he's a top 24 wide receiver. So that's probably the biggest takeaway, I think, for wide receivers in this secret stats. Tight ends is super sticky. Like, look at this. The top 10 tight ends last year, and again, this is when I combine targets, opportunity, and yard share, and I get this total percentage. The top 9 tight ends in my my percents here all finished as top 10 tight ends. So this is extremely valuable for tight end positions. You want a guy that's going to get targets. He's going to get opportunity. Not too many guys run the ball as far as tight ends go. So opportunity and target share are kind of the same thing here. But yard share, you look at some of these percentages here. These guys are all about 10% or greater. So that means for every 10 yards their team gets, they get at least one of them. And Kelsey is the GOAT here at 18.6. 12 to 14% usually means you're going to be a top 5 tight end. And then around 10% gives you the opportunity to get a top 10 finish at tight end. If I keep going here, again, these tight ends ranked 10 through 19th on my percentile score. They all ranked pretty good. A lot of these guys were tight end twos. Conklin, Goddard, Everett, Hawkinson, Juwan Johnson. Hooper was kind of down here, but he had a high target share in the Titans offense. Kyle Pitts got hurt. Tunyon, Hunter Henry, Dawson Knox. Again, a lot of these tight ends finished pretty highly. And then Taysom Hill kind of came out of nowhere. He was tight end 8, but he just didn't get enough targets, so he's kind of an outlier on his own. But again, using these metrics, tight ends really stick out. Now let's look at the target share for tight end. And I'm going to show you guys, we'll show you the top 10 tight ends in target share last year. That's Kelsey, Andrews, Higbee, Kmet, Freiermuth, Kittle, Ingram, Schultz, and Njoku. The top 9 tight ends in target share, all top 10 tight ends. So, and then what you're seeing here is these are the targets here. Kelsey 152, Andrews 113. The lowest amount of targets you see on this list is 69. So essentially what this means is to be a tight end 1 this season, you need at least 70 targets. And I'm going to even stretch that. I think for your tight end 1, if he can get 80 or more targets, he's going to probably be a top 10 tight end, which feels really good. The closer he is to 100, the more likely that he can be a top 5, top 10 tight end. And then basically, if you go over 100 targets as a tight end, you're probably an elite tight end, top 1, 2, 3, 4 tight end for sure here. So that's kind of the target threshold for tight ends. Let's scroll on down here for the yard. I guess this is the opportunity, which basically it sums it up with the yards. Again, you want a player that's going to touch the ball a lot. And then look where Taysom Hill pops. This is basically the Taysom Hill chart, and why I think if you play in half PPR or standard, Taysom Hill is the guy you want to draft on your fantasy team because he's going to get a lot of opportunities touching the ball. He's going to get more than 13 targets this year, and he's going to get over 100 total touches this season. So he might be frustrating to start every week, but the dude's going to get carries, and he's probably going to throw the ball a little bit. And he was tight end 8 in full PPR league. He just goes higher in standard and half PPR. So don't sleep on Taysom Hill. He pops in this metric for sure. And then here's the yardage totals. And the yardage totals, again, pretty sticky here. If I go to the top 10 tight ends here, the top 10 tight ends in yard share, Kelsey at 18%, Andrews at 14%. If you're in a 12% range for yard share, you're going to be a good top 5 tight end option. And then basically anything over 10% means you're going to be a low tight end 1, which means kind of like tight end 8 through 12 in that range here. The only outlier here, I guess, the top 10 tight ends in the yard share metric, we're all top 11 tight ends. So again, if you're getting yards as a tight end, you're going to be up there. And Cole Kmet's the outlier because he didn't get a lot of targets, didn't get a lot of yards, but he got a lot of touchdowns. That's why he ranked as tight end 7. So if we just look at the top 9 guys, you can see the lowest yardage totals are about 620. So for me, if I'm drafting a tight end, I'm asking, can he go over 600 yards? He's probably a fringe tight end 1. If he goes over 700 yards, the dude's a top 10 tight end. Over 800, he's a top 5 tight end. And then, of course, the 1,000 to 900, that's a top 5 tight end. That's Travis Kelce. You get it. But that's it. That's the tight end numbers I'm looking for. And then I do have some stats I want to show you guys here. And then I did kind of say this too. Tight ends who can approach 100 targets or more as elite top 5 options. Mid tight end 1 should be around 80 to 90. And then tight end 1 floor, which means tight end 12, should be around 70 targets. And then as far as the target percentages go, elite tight ends get 20+%. Very solid to mid tight end 1s can be around 16 to 18%. And then tight end 1s have a floor of about 10 to 12%. Now, the final part of this video is going to be my projected stat leaders for 2023. Here are my tight ends. So I combined target share, op share, and yard share, and I got that total percentage here for you guys. These are my top highest scoring wide receivers here. So these are my top 10 tight ends. So Jefferson, Devontae, Tyreek, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, and DeAndre Hopkins. Now, DeAndre Hopkins is one of those guys that I think is going to qualify for those outliers that we discussed earlier. He's a wide receiver 3. He's on a bad passing offense, but he's going to get all the opportunity in the world. The other 9 guys here I see as being potential top 12 tight end 1 or wide receiver 1s. More outliers for you. DJ Moore, I feel best with him as a wide receiver 3. He's just in a low volume offense. And then you can even see like the outliers here, like wide receiver 22, wide receiver 26, wide receiver 29, wide receiver 20. DeAndre, DJ Moore, Deontay, Drake London, basically the same list from last year. These guys are all wide receiver 3s. And then the list kind of returns back to normal. So check out the projections when you can. And then I want to show you guys just the tight ends real quick. I showed the top 16 or so tight ends. The top tight ends for me this season, Kelsey. Kyle Pitts is going to get all the opportunity in the world. He just suffers a little bit from efficiency, but Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, Pat Freiermuth, Evan Ingram, and Tyler Higbee. I think if you get one of these 10 tight ends, you're going to be okay at the position. And then some sleepers here, Njoku, Schultz, Kmet, Hayden Hurst, Jake Ferguson, Trey McBride. So check out the list. Check out the article as well in the description, guys. Again, I'm gonna probably post it in the comments for you. But there you go, the 2023 secret stats you need for wide receiver and tight end. Check it out. Let me know what you guys think, and check out the running back video too if you haven't yet. We'll see you guys in a future video. Peace.